Here we go, students. This is Morales, and this is our Chapter 13 review, starting out with Chapter 13.1. Let's get going. All right, these are the objectives you need to understand. So similar to what we started out with the notes in class, Zoom, whatever it was. 13.1, restoring centralized imperial rule. Understand the Sui, understand Tang organize, Tang and Song set up long-lasting administration, and then how the Song rose and fell. And then we also have the Tang, number 2, prospered and fell. All right, so everything starts with the Sui dynasty back in 589 CE, CE for Common Era. That's this side of the timeline. Before 0 is BCE. All right, so there was this group called the Han, somewhere around 260, 240-ish, I can't remember. The Han dynasty falls apart, and then China goes into a period of kind of semi-turmoil. It's got a whole bunch of different names for it, for the region. There are 3 groups that were kind of vying for power, and then it would split up into more, and so on and so on. But no one could control all of China at all or unify it. So about 300 years of disunity, and then all of a sudden, in comes this guy. Oh, I'm sorry. There's the map of 560. So there's 3 major groups, like I mentioned. Okay, none of them able to control all of China. If you control all that area or most of it, then you would have a Chinese empire. But instead, they're splitting up into kind of regional states. In comes this guy named Yang Zhan. Okay, and he's going to be coming to power and setting up a new dynasty called the Sui dynasty. So it's SUI, but Sui dynasty. And he's going to be the first to centralize China after that long-term time period of turmoil, like I mentioned. And in it, he's going to set up a structure that's going to last for a long, long, long time, near 700 years, where they're going to have some sort of clear centralized imperial rule in China. All right, so with this, here's a map of the dynasty he's going to set up and control. So he takes over more territory till he controls what you see in the map here. And then the maps that you're going to see, they're hit or miss. So they're a little bit off, a little bit close. It all depends on whose research they're using. We could keep going. Okay, massive building projects under the Sui dynasty. That was a big thing. They're going to build lots of palaces, lots of roads, lots of infrastructure, stuff necessary to make business happen, to make China happen. And they're also going to have military labor. Okay? People get to go be in the military, so that's one of the things. Okay? And also conscripted labor. You get to go build roads. So these are get-to policies. If you don't get to, there's some sort of punishment. This is called conscription, force, coerce, compulsory, a whole bunch of different terms that your book uses for it. Basically, these people are being forced into a situation. They don't always like it, and they're cranky at the government, but the government's very strong and powerful, and if he talks back, then you're in trouble. So that's pretty much how it works. All this adds up to the Sui not being liked by the people in China. However, they do unify China through harsh conditions. All right, one of the biggest notable contributions of the Sui dynasty was the creation of the Grand Canal. So what it is connecting a series of whole bunch of smaller canals, but then adding a whole bunch and literally putting a canal through a mountain. So there's one part where they remove part of a mountain so they could get the canal through. And this is kind of where the Chinese are just kind of a bit insane sometimes. So they say, hey, we're going to build a canal through here. And some people are saying, but you can't. There's a mountain there. I said, yeah, we'll take care of that. And they do. They just move the mountain. That's what they did. All right. So the Grand Canal does this huge thing, but it connects the south down here to the north. And in particular over here, this is where rice is going to come in soon or start to be harvested in this area where it could grow along the lower river, the Yangtze River. This one up here, the Huanghe or Yellow River. All right. And so up in the north, there's no rice being grown. It just doesn't grow. It's too cold of a climate. Down here, rice is going to grow very plentiful, especially along the Yangtze River. All right. Most of the Chinese rivers flow west to east. So you can see them kind of going this way from west, from the hills and the desert area out to the sea, to the South China, to the Yellow Sea, and to the South China Sea down here. But they're going to connect it, and what this does is more than just connect it for trade. It also is going to connect it for cultural aspects, and it's going to help to unify this China into one more cultural group, a stronger cultural group. All right, the Emperor Sui Yangdi he's going to be the second emperor that comes along. He's going to be the one that is going to build palaces and granaries and repair the Great Wall. There's parts of it, and it's during this time the Great Wall gets a big jump on it. It's going to be during the Ming Dynasty, which later that's going to increase even more so later on because they're fearful of the Mongols. And he's also going to take parts of Central Asia out here, this area, and also parts of Korea, which is off the map. You can barely see a little gray area. And he's the one that has the high taxes and compulsory labor, making the people all cranky and stuff. All right. Like I said, the Grand Canal, what's it do? It linked the networks of earlier canals, 2,000 miles. So that's huge. Back then, these guys are doing it in 600 CE. We have trouble building canals now. Okay? So the big dig of the Panama Canal, wow, impressive. Okay, but that's with modern techniques. All right, roads on either side, and it unites North and South into trade and culture, like I said. Okay, in comes the next group. Oh, because the Sui were so kind of mean to their people, they have lots of little rebellions, and at any time someone sees, now's my chance to move in. One guy that's going to move in is this guy named Li Yuan. Okay, he's the founder of the Tang. He's not in your books. You might want to write this down because maybe he shows up on a test. Anyways, he's a general of a certain area. I forget exactly where, but he's going to be able to put himself in a position where he gets some friends and backing, and he's able to take over after a short period of time when the Sui fall apart. I think there's like a 20-year gap-ish where there's no one clearly in power, and he comes in and he sets up a new dynasty called the Tang Dynasty that's going to last near 300 years. And it's during the Tang that China enters the beginning of the Golden Age. The Sui got it going. They're only around for about 30 years, and it's during the Tang that they really get this head start, and they're going to build this massive empire, massive in size, massive in technology, massive in economy, massive in culture. They're going to be one of the most influential places to ever existed, and also be the most, and put China on the map. They're the it of ancient history. All right. Why discontent over the conscript? We already talked about this. I'll move forward. Rebellion prompted military failures in Korea. The Sui were having trouble in Korea. They couldn't get they put tons of soldiers over there, and they couldn't get a decisive win. Emperor Sui Yongdi is assassinated. So that was the second emperor and the last emperor. And the Tang initiated Tang dynasty initiated by this guy named Li Yan. Sorry. Okay. So that's this guy right here. He goes from being regional governor to the Emperor Gao Zhao. So that's his thing. So one of the things you're going to catch is, in particular in many places, but in China, and so they might have a common name like Li Yan. Okay. And then when they become emperor, they'll take on a emperor name. So his name is Emperor Gao Zhao, and I don't know what Gao Zhao stands for. It usually means kind of like special one or awesome one or some sort of thing like that. All right, the top dog in the Tang dynasty is this guy named Tang Taizong, and you'll see him. You'll recognize him because he's always pictured in these fancy yellow. So this kind of robe type outfit with he doesn't always have the cape, but he's got these big emblems, and he's got these kind of funky hat with the wings on it. So keep an eye out for that. That means he's a special, very important person. This is Tang Taizong. So what's he do? He's the guy that gets it going. So one of the things that we're going to see with this cycle of empires and dynasties is there's going to be a founder that gets it going, but then right away, within like the second or the third person in line, there's got to be this guy that sets up a system for it to hold together, an administrative system. So yeah, they might be a conqueror, and yes, they might be, like a guy that is good to the people and everything, but they set up some sort of system that helps the dynasty last for a long time. And that's this guy, Tang Taizong. So he's more important for not so much military, but the administrative system he's going to set up. Okay. Oh, he's also really ruthless. So he was the guy that encouraged his dad to attack. He's also the guy that once his dad he's like, all right, Dad, you got to go and get the heck out of the way. He kills his two brothers. He had an older brother that was technically supposed to be in line, or maybe technically sort of in line. Okay. And he kills him. Okay. So he can't be in line if you're in line for the throne if you're dead. And then he pushes his father aside, and his dad recognizes his kid is very dangerous and says, you know what, I'm good here. So I'm going to retire to one of these little palaces and chill, and you have fun running China. And Tang Taizong takes it from there. All right. Strong ruler built the capital Chang'an, law and order. So he brings law and order. That sounds familiar, but in a different context. Anyways, things are going so well that the taxes are quite low. Your book said 1/40th, so 2.5% tax on the people. So that's not too much. But there were other taxes they had to pay. They still had to do some work and some conscripted labor type of things, but it wasn't anywhere as intense as the sway. So lesson learned: sway, too oppressive, too mean, taxes too high, too much going on. So not the thing that they wanted. More effective implementation of earlier sway policies. So they saw some of the policies that the sway were doing, trying to carry them out, and they said, okay, we're going to do that, but we're not going to be such jerks and where we get the people cranky, because that causes rebellion, and rebellion causes chaos, and chaos is not a good thing to happen, and we don't want that in China because we had 200 years of it, 300 years of that. So, all right. Some of the achievements of the Tang Dynasty, and this is where this is it. This is the good stuff that they did, or the impressive stuff. So, best picture I could find. It's supposed to be from ancient China, but I have no idea. It looks very cartoonish, but maybe. All right, transportation and communications. They're going to have this massive empire, so they're going to have to be able to get across. So, in your map, or in your book, there was a map that said, how could they run this? So all this is part of the transportation communication system. So your book mentioned that they could get from any one part of the empire to another part within 8 days. And you guys go, oh, 8 days. Okay, you have high-speed internet. Back then, these guys were running, and that would be like the 7G of their time. Okay, no one could go this fast, this far, or that far, that fast. And so they had the courier service, postal service, all these things to get messages across, and they also built up some roads so they could transport troops and other things along the way quickly and efficiently. So all this communication is going to help them to keep their massive empire in check. They set up this thing called the equal field system, which is a way to do two things. One, to make sure that the populace doesn't get too cranky, mad. Two, to make sure that the nobles, the aristocrats, don't get too wealthy. So by keeping the aristocrats in check, it's their biggest threat. One thing we'll notice is in our study of history is that the emperors do not fear the people, the common people, so much. For the long history until modern times, the long history, it's not the people they fear usually. It's other aristocrats and other nobles, because the aristocrats and nobles have the means, power, and the deviousness, to take on the emperor. And this has happened a whole bunch of times where an emperor got overthrown by another noble, by another, lord or duke or person like that. So one way the equal field system does that is that once someone dies, 20% of their land goes to their family. So only 20%. So if the guy has 100 acres of land, 20% is shared with the family, and the other 80% is given back to the state, and the state's going to decide what to do with it. They might give some of it to parts of the family. They might keep it and give it to some other guy that's maybe in a different situation, or a more successful farmer. Maybe they got a big family, got to feed more people, that type of things. So by doing that, they're going to limit and control who gets the land. So this is a system, and much like many systems, as long as they're keeping an eye on it, making sure it's run smoothly, it's going to run well. But once they get kind of lazy and don't care too much about it, and bribes come in, then things are going to go bad. And so for the Tang, it's going to start to go bad in the 8th century. So in the 700s, it's going to start to go downhill, partly because of corruption. The people in charge of it would take bribes and say, oh, yeah, we're going to let you keep 20%. And by the way, okay, give me a trip down to the Bahamas, and you could keep another 10%, which is calling it kind of even, that type of stuff. And also they're going to lose some of the lands to the monasteries, which some of the people would donate some of their lands to get in good with Buddha, so they get like a ticket to the nice place in Nirvana. All right, we'll talk more about that later. All right, here's the thing that they set up, the bureaucracy of merit. And this is a thing that it's close to your heart, whether you know it or not, because it's a merit system. So here's some guys, okay, over here they're taking a test. These are the teachers. There's Morales right there, and here's one of the kids pleading. Well, what happened there? One of the kids pleading with them, saying, please help me, please help me. And over here, these guys are taking the test. If they do well in the test, they're going to get a good job, working for the bureaucracy. And it's not some guy like at the DMV. We're talking some guy that has a lot of power and influences, goes around to the areas, going to check to see how things are going, and have lots of connections. These guys if they're in your family, can help you to get good things, like to get benefits of land if there's ever dispute. So these imperial civil service exams, the better you do, the higher position you can get. Okay? That's what you guys are doing. Okay? Does this sound familiar? Take a test and you get a better job. So that's what these kids are doing. I think this is 2 years ago. Yep. Okay. Here they are doing a test, and if they do well in a test, they can get a better position. So same thing, AP test, okay, you get a better position. Go to college, get a better position. Go to graduate school, get a better position. All right, candidates for this advance through merit. What merit means, if you do well, you move forward. If you don't do well, you don't move forward. That's pretty simple. Okay. Only problem is there's a whole bunch involved in it, and the things that they're studying is Confucian ideas and Confucian, basically those things. Kind of what would Confucius do in a situation like this? How would he handle it? What would he say about those? And what this does is makes a uniform group mindset for how they're going to handle things, and in doing so, they set up a system where there's going to be a certain expectation, a common expectation around there. So they have a common set of principles for guiding them on how to run the empire. And this makes it stable because they know what's going to happen. People know the expectations and how things are going to work. In doing so, when they bring in stability, they bring in the golden age of Tang and Song China. All right, built loyalty to the dynasty because these people work for the dynasty. The system remained strong until the early 20th century, until the 1900s. It starts to fall apart at that time, and with the revolution that comes in 1911, I think is it? Yeah. All right. Tang military expansion, so always conquest, and when the empire takes over, they always conquer a little bit of territory. Sometimes they just retain what they got, like the Song, but there's some sort of thing involvement. Okay, these guys are going to go into Manchuria, which is to northeast of China, near Korea, just before Korea, to Korea, which is definitely northeast of China, Vietnam, which is in the south, and Tibet, which is way out west and a little bit south. Okay, so all expansions into this area. One of the largest expansions in China, and Tang Dynasty is going to be humongous. Okay, so all the areas in yellow, the areas in greens are their neighbors who they would have relations with it. So in some cases, pretty good. The Tibetan Empire, they're going to go and control it, and Tibet's going to be kind of a tributary state of this place. Over here in Korea, the Silla down in the south, and I can't remember how to pronounce this one, but they're going to control parts of it. The Silla is going to be an example of the tributary state where the Silla say, okay, you guys, China, you guys are pretty cool and hip, and you got all the stuff and power, and so we'll pretend that you're our emperor, even though technically you're not, but it gets us good stuff and gets us trade with you guys, and you guys got all the cool stuff. And so that's worth it for us to go to China every now and then, send some envoys, people that represent the place, and go bow down to you and give you some of our trinkets from Korea. And in exchange, you give us that Chinese cool stuff. We could do with that. Okay, and so that's how it's going to work. I already explained tributary relations. So that's what I just explained. China gets a big head, and rightfully so, because they are the it of this time period. All the way until about the 1800s, no one comes close to being as cool as China. Okay, so everyone else is behind the time. China has the coolest everything, and so they get this reputation that they are in the middle of everything, and everyone else is on the edge. All those people are barbarians. And so if you come to China and you're a foreigner, you have to do this kowtow ritual, which is the bowing. It's a whole process. So you bow 3 times and then tap your head to the floor 3 times. So 9 steps are involved or whatever like that. And then this guy is doing it. So the whole thing is that the envoys to the place, they would never see the emperor. He's just too special, because you don't get to see someone that special. You would get to see someone on equal status. So a very special envoy might be able to get in the same room, but the emperor would be behind a screen, okay, because they're going to be elevated in status. So all this is part of the ritual, just to show off that the Chinese have the enormous power, and that other people are willing to be subservient to them to get what they want, to get the trade, to get the connections with China, to be kind of on their friendly side. All right, so this is the map from your book. I'll point out that Silla's over here in the bottom end, and it wasn't shaded in. It's just annoying me that this brand new book does such a poor quality on maps. Okay. Anyway, why was the Tang Dynasty able to extend its authority over such a vast distance? We already mentioned that. Okay, what's the thing that's going to be able to get this stuff across? Okay, get a message from Chang'an to all the way out here to the far, far western part of their empire, from Chang'an to over here. So they got the Grand Canal to help them. They got the courier system. Your book mentioned from Ningbo, right here, they got fish to Chang'an, the capital, fresh fish. Okay, I think it was 800 miles away, okay, 600 miles away. Well, I'd be leery here in the United States of, getting sushi in Yuma, which is only 2 hours away from San Diego, because I wouldn't trust it. Okay, because sushi better be fresh, or else you might be having a bellyache. All right, so all these are elements as to why the Tang dynasty was able to extend its authority, because they were controlled, yada yada. All right, Tang decline. Okay, let's get rid of the Tang. Governmental neglect. Emperor obsessed with favorite music. Okay, same thing. Okay, we've seen this before, where decline of empire is going to have two factors, usually internal problems and external problems. One of the biggest internal problems is people running it get fat and lazy. Maybe not fat, but they get lazy and unconcerned, and they get a big head, and they think they're so special that they don't have to run it. And running an empire is work. You have to work at it, and you have to be constant. Okay, so he like to hang out with his concubine, and concubine is not a prostitute. Kids always think it's a prostitute. I understand why, but a concubine back at this time for an imperial person is not a concubine. It's not a prostitute. Excuse me. So what this is a female who would be part of kind of a harem for the emperor. Now, if you're in a noble family and you have a daughter, you're kind of sad because you have a daughter, but your salvation might be is that maybe that daughter can become a concubine of the emperor. And if the emperor finds her to his liking, she might have a special status in the group. With that, your family might move up a little bit in society because your daughter is now the concubine of the emperor. And in some cases, the emperor might even marry that one and she might become the official empress, okay, of the emperor, okay, but not always. Okay. Also, the concubine is a safety catch because the emperor would have several children, many children, because they want to make sure that there's a kid in line to follow for the succession, for the throne. And let's say that he marries a woman and they have a kid, and he's just not the brightest tool in the shed. Well, at one point in time, you might say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of my other wife, and he doesn't have to kill her. You could just lock her up or send her away far, far away, and then make the kid go away. You could have an accident where he's looking over the wall, and then all of a sudden, boom, he gets stabbed in the heart and falls over the wall. These things happen. And then in comes the next son in line because they wanted to make sure that China's in good hands. So these things happen. So this is trying to kill your idea about the princess and all love and that type of stuff, because marriage to an emperor is not love. It's a business of running the empire. So, all right, this guy got lazy and just wanted to hang out. And in comes this guy named An Lushan, okay, who's actually a nomad who works for the Tang dynasty. He's a general, and he's a kickbutt general. He's kind of keep these people over in Manchuria, I can't remember their name right now, in check, the Khitan in check. And he's gotten a couple impressive battles and all this stuff, and then he gets in a competition. He pisses off the new administrator in chief, and they get into a brawl. And then An Lushan says, all right, the current emperor is busy. He's just hanging out with girls and doing his thing, and he's not really running the place, so he decides to take over, and he takes the capital in a rebellion, and then eventually he himself is killed by his troops because they thought they were going to get a reward if they do this. And then in comes the Tang troops later on to mop up the rest of the troops. They kill the guys that killed An Lushan. They never get their reward, and then they restore the empire, but it's weakened. So from 763 on, the empire is there, but it's no longer strong. And in fact, they open up the door to problems because in order to get the rebels out of the two capitals, Chang'an and Luoyang, they had to bring in some help from outside called the Uyghurs. Okay? The Uyghurs are a nomadic group who live off to the west, okay, who have had a whole bunch of dealings with the Tang people, but now have been working for them as mercenaries. They're hired soldiers. So they come in, beat up the remaining groups of An Lushan's troops. An Lushan's dead by now. And then the deal is that if they do this for the Tang, they get to sack Chang'an and Luoyang, which sounds really weird because Chang'an and Luoyang were the capitals of the Tang dynasty. There's a temporary new capital further south, and they're going to allow the Uyghurs to go and basically rip it up and take all the stuff and loot and pillage as much as they want. And that happens. I think they let it happen for like a week or something like that in each city. Okay. Tang decline continued after that and shows that the people don't trust him. And by the 9th century, tons of little rebellions. And finally, the last emperor, who's also kind of a weak emperor, abdicates in 907 CE. Boom. Ended the Tang, and into our next group and last one, hang in there, okay, the Song dynasty. And the Song come in, and they're going to be a little bit different. So a common question is compare and contrast the political administration of the Tang to that of the Song dynasty. So these guys, because they saw what happened with the military generals who were causing most of the rebellion, it wasn't a rebellion of people usually. Okay, it was usually a rebellion of, oh, I think I could do a better job, and I'm a general, and I'm an aristocrat, and I have an army, and I'm going to take over, that type of stuff. These guys are going to put an emphasis on administration, industry, education, and arts. The Song are all about improving the stuff in China, not so much the conquest, because they're not much of a conquering empire. They're also very cautious about the military, and so they're going to keep an eye on it. They put civilians in charge of the military because they don't trust the generals. They said, General, you got to talk to my administrator because he's in charge of that. And it used to be administrator was lower, and the general would talk to directly to like the higher ups, including the emperor. No longer. So it starts with this guy, okay, Song Taizu. Okay. You notice that the Song name comes first. That's a family name or the region name, so that comes first. And this is a endemic in most Asian, especially East Asian societies, where the last name goes first, and then the first name goes second. Okay, so he's going to be the former military leader who comes in, even though he doesn't like the military. It's because he's seen what happened in previous administrations or previous dynasties, like the Tang. Made emperor by troops because they liked the way he was organizing stuff, and then he ends up kind of taking over after a small gap in what happened after the Tang dynasty, excuse me. And then he's going to institute the policy that's favor for civil servants. Those are the people who pass the test. If you prove yourself, you move up and you have more power and say, but you have to run the empire. But with that, you get a whole bunch of important positions, which could bring wealth to your position and to your family. And since if you bring good stuff to your family, okay, it helps you out. Okay, so that's the deal. All right, here's the Song dynasty. So it started out this thin kind of purple shaded line that is the OG Song Empire. And then to the north come this group called the Jin from Manchuria up here in the northwest. And they're going to take over the northern part. They're going to take over Kaifeng, which used to be a capital, not Chang'an, but they're going to pressure Chang'an a whole bunch of time, and Hangzhou, which is another second capital of the southern Song, which they moved to after in what's called the later or southern Song period. All right. We're almost done. Last part. Sorry, kids. Okay, size of bureaucracy, heavy drain on the economy, because they had so many administrators and kept on getting more and more administrators and more administrators, because it almost became like a pyramid where there'd be one administrator and he'd have two guys below him, and those guys would have two and two and two and two. Pretty soon you have this massive group of bureaucrats, but that's how they run it, because if you become a part of the bureaucracy, you have a better system. Only problem, those people got to get paid. And they want to get paid, and they're in charge of the money. They're the tax collectors, so they make sure they take their cut. And that weakens the coffers of the imperial throne, because they have less money to do things because they're paying so much for their bureaucrats. Their internal inertia prevented reform through the bureaucracy. In other words, they're not going to get cleaned up because who's running the show for them are the bureaucrats. So the bureaucrats are not going to be happy about, I think we should cut bureaucrats. No, let's cut the military. Ooh, things aren't good. They're spending too much money. Okay, let's cut other stuff. Let's cut money for the wall. Let's cut money for boats. And the last thing they're going to cut is bureaucrats. It's kind of like Congress taking a pay cut. Okay, probably never going to happen. Civil service leadership for military. Okay, that's another problem. The second thing that happened is they were in charge of the military, and they are not really trained in military, and that's probably a bad thing. Okay, so instead of being military people in charge of it, okay, and the other person being advisor, these guys can order them what to do, and that turns into bad situation because they don't know what's going on. Unable to contain nomadic attacks, and so once you can't contain the nomadic attacks in China, you're done. It's just a matter of time. In come this group called the Gurkhan. Okay. And they forced the Song dynasty to Hangzhou, like I showed you before. Okay, and the Gurkhan are the same as the Jin. Okay. Gurkhan, Jin. All right, and we have a video. Okay, and eventually the song are going to retreat all the way to Southern Song, and then we're going to have our last part, the end of song in 1279, and the wait for it. I don't know if you heard that. Maybe you heard it. I don't know if I put on the monitor or the speaker for that. And I think that's it.